Whoops, maybe. I'm gonna have to go full to big screen first. Okay. And I think I'm gonna hit share computer sound because I think I'm gonna need that later. So
Okay.
we'll see if that works. So good. Well, thanks for joining me tonight. My name is Sarah Wells, and I work with the college's mental health team, and so the counseling center. We are located in Tower Hall, which is right 2150 on the second floor. So right above One Stop and Financial Aid. And we are doing services now. We're providing telemental health and are all set up to do that for students and to provide that additional support. So I just want to let students know that that's an option for them. So tonight we're going to talk about managing stress, really managing stress for sort of those big tests that move you towards credentialing and licensure. But really, as we talk about stress, we're going to have probably a general overview about stress first and just sort of understanding how stress affects your body and mind, and then sort of move into really those specific strategies for how do I then take that information and apply it to a big test or a test that I'm about to take, or my way of prepping and studying for a big test. So we'll kind of do an overview, but keep in mind that as we talk about stress, again, it could be stress about, you know, finding a job, figuring out finances, dealing with a friendship, dealing with whatever kind of comes along. And so just knowing that that's part of that, I think can be really helpful. And my slideshow didn't quite start. Let me do from the beginning. There we go. All right, that's a little bit easier to see. There we go. Okay. All right, so I always have like a little bit of humor. According to latest research, I think our students feel like the average human body is 20% water and 8% stress. I think our students feel like their stress levels are high, and we know that they report high levels of stress as they go through their college careers. My internet connection, is it okay, Katie? Is it? Okay, all right.
We can hear you, Sarah. It just kind of froze a little bit, but you're
okay.
Good. You're good.
I'll try to keep, I can't control the internet, but we'll try to do what we can.
Sounds good.
If it gets bad, just kind of wave at me, okay? So that I know. All right, so stress is really about any demand placed upon us. So when we think about any demand placed upon us, really you think about what are the things that you did today, just from the time you got up this morning until tonight at 7 o'clock. What are the stresses and what are the demands that have been placed on you? Was it feeding my dog who wanted to go for a walk this morning? Was it somebody needing breakfast? Was it my own body needing breakfast? What was the things that I had to do, or what were the demands that were placed upon me? And so we know that that list is pretty big. Ideally, what we want to do is we want to be able to manage stress in a healthy way. And we're going to talk about this little graphic. I think it's a good graphic to kind of talk about, because we know that stress is normal. We know that it's normal to have demands placed upon us. It's how we respond to those demands and how we balance those demands that really is important in how well we function. And really the goal is not to eliminate stress, because we can't eliminate every demand placed upon us, but our goal is to be able to manage the stress that we endure and to try to find a way so that we don't fall over that top of that hump into exhaustion and ill health. So if you look on the left-hand side is performance. So as more and more is expected out of us, that stress level goes up. And then our stress arousal goes up as well on the bottom of the graph. And so you'll see that there's a really nice comfort zone, sort of there on the left-hand side that's shaded. That comfort zone is the point where we kind of perform our best, because our body doesn't know the difference between good stress and bad stress. So whenever we have that good stress, our oxygen level goes up, our stress hormones kick in, we get a boost of energy, we feel really good. We might actually perform better in that comfort zone. That's kind of our peak performance, as long as we don't stay in that for a sustained period of time. And as long as we're not in it for a long period of time. Okay, so, and then our goal is also to not fall over that top and not fall into the fatigue and exhaustion level. So if anybody has ever participated in like a music concert, or done like participated in an athletic competition, or done a speech, you get that sort of competitive edge, or that little edge of like nervousness that helps you perform well and helps you really be your best. And that's what we're talking about in this comfort zone. but it's short-term in duration as opposed to long-term and chronic. And we know that the long-term and chronic is what causes the problem for people. Okay. So eustress is the term that we don't hear very often. Eustress is actually the term that we use for good stress. What we usually hear people refer to is what they say, stress, I'm so stressed. What they're really talking about is distress. But for today, we want to separate those for a second. And we want to understand that, again, that good level of stress that our body can't tell the difference in is going to be short-term in nature. It's going to motivate us. It's going to improve our energy and focus. It's going to help us feel invigorated. It's going to energize us. The other thing that's important about eustress, and this is you'll see where this ties into study skills, is with eustress, we believe that what we're doing is within our capabilities. We believe that we can achieve it, and we can believe that it's something we can handle. It's something that's often familiar or just inching us outside of that comfort zone. So it feels manageable. Okay, and that's going to be really important as we talk a little bit later about ways to manage stress. And then, of course, on the other side, we have distress. And so distress is going to leave us sort of feeling the opposite. We're going to feel demotivated, lack of energy, lack of motivation, generally unpleasant feelings, maybe even painful feelings. Our performance is actually going to decrease, and our ability to perform tasks is actually going to decline. And we may lead to feeling physically ill, emotionally depleted, or mental fatigue. So definitely sort of that balance of the eustress and distress becomes really important. So can you think for just a few minutes, what are some examples of eustress that you've maybe experienced in your life? You may want to throw a couple out. I mentioned some examples, but any others?
I remember experiencing eustress when I was about to do the interview for the HIM program.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, great example. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So right before a big interview, right? Okay, good. I also think graduations are big another time where we're kind of feeling that big stress, right? Now graduation this year is going to be a little bit different because if you're looking to graduate, like obviously that whole thing has shifted because of kind of the pandemic and the situation that we're in. But that's kind of a eustress. It's probably a good stress for most people. But there is probably a stress associated with graduation and walking across the stage. Birth of a child, marriage, big life events, moves, new jobs, any of those things kind of fall in that level. Okay.
When I go to Chicago to visit my son who has a band, he will call me on stage, and I have giant eustress.
Okay, it's good. Short-term in nature, energizes, invigorates, but you can handle it. Good.
So far, yeah.
So far, good. Yay, we want that. All right. So just sort of understanding that, you know, stress is really about our reaction to it and our ability to recognize what's going on for us. And then also about whether or not we can manage it, and the duration becomes big. Sort of on another note, one of the things that is of concern right now kind of going on in our world is with the pandemic that's going on, what we're seeing is increased levels of stress that are sort of maintaining. We don't necessarily have a resolution. We don't necessarily have certainty about when the pandemic's going to end or certainty about what's going to happen next and what's this going to look like. And so one of the things that's happening is that because of the nature of the pandemic, our stress levels are sort of getting stretched out. And so they're creating a little bit longer and a little more distress for people because of that uncertainty and that lack of shortness in nature. I think I've definitely seen students shift from like, okay, 2 weeks, I got this, to like, okay, not sure when this is going to stop. So just sort of recognizing that we can shift even with a particular stressor, that our perspective can kind of shift depending on, you know, the duration and nature of that stressor. So, so I was like this, I think one of the things that higher education does, and particularly as we enter into kind of the work world, is that we have to step out of our comfort zone. We have to try new things. And trying new things is really about eustress, and being able to manage it in a way that doesn't create distress is really important. But we know it's going to happen. We know that we're going to have life experiences that are outside of our comfort zone. And when we have those, our job is to be resilient and to have the ability to bounce back or return to our original form. So Madonna gave the example of going up on stage and feeling nervous and anxious up there, but then when that event is over, returning back to a state of normal and returning back to a state of calm. Tatum, same thing after you did your interview. How long was it that you returned back? Can I put you on the spot before you felt like you were kind of back to a little bit more to my norm?
It actually happened during the interview after I calmed down and was a little less stressed. But then as soon as the interview was over, I was like, okay, back to normal.
I got this. So even the first few minutes, even for you, was that eustress, but even coming down from that eustress in the middle of that interview. And really, if you can make that work in a test, when you go take this test for certification, that is what you want to do, because that's going to help you perform your best. And so that's really a great example. And so again, resilience is our ability to recover easily. If we do hit those points where we fall over at that edge and we get into feeling ill or feeling exhausted, how quickly can we come back? How quickly can we bounce back from that? So the other thing I always like to mention too is that we all have different coping capacities. And I always like to mention that we really need to be careful about how we judge our stress and we judge other people's stress, because everyone experiences different life experiences. We all have different coping skills. We all have different strategies that we use. And so we just want to be really cautious and aware of that. And I like the example of a light bulb and a tennis ball. We know two people can experience the same situation, and one person is going to be like a light bulb. And when that stressful situation kind of comes crashing down, that light bulb's going to shatter, and they're going to really struggle, and they're going to fall over the top, and they're going to not be in a very healthy place and not be in a good place. And so we want to recognize that and be able to provide emotional support if we know that people are really struggling. And vice versa, we also know those people that are like tennis balls. Like the stressors just keep coming at them and coming at them and coming at them, and they just keep on bouncing. They just keep on rolling. And so I just really like to point out and make sure that we're aware that we can't judge how we're doing against others. That's not necessarily a good judge. We need to be able to be reflective and think about how we're doing with our coping capacities and with what our life experiences have been. So just keep that in mind as we kind of talk about some of these things tonight. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, we're gonna jump now into how do we start to develop that resiliency? And the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna engage our brains and connect that with our bodies. And so we're gonna talk about how to do that. And so one of the things I like to kind of talk about is the difference between what we call thinking brain and emotion brain, or you might hear called logic brain and thinking brain or feeling brain. But really what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna talk about how we can use both parts of our brains to help manage and regulate ourselves while we take tests and manage stress. And then we're gonna put it together and talk a little bit about mindfulness and how that can be beneficial as you move forward with stress. So for our thinking brain, we're gonna have logic, problem solving, conflict resolution, reframing, which is maybe reconsidering what our thoughts look like, choices, decision making. That's all gonna happen in our thinking brain. Our emotion brain is gonna really be looking for emotional validation, support, empathy, calming strategies, things to keep us emotionally regulated as we go through. So we're gonna talk about thinking brain first. I like this little quote: I do not fix problems, I fix my thinking, and then the problems fix themselves, okay? So one of the things that's gonna be effective is just problem solving strategies. If I'm stressed out and I'm worried about something and I can problem solve that, that might help me decrease my stress level. So if I'm really, really worried about a whole bunch of assignments that I have coming up, and I get myself organized and I come up with a plan of how I'm gonna get all of these assignments done, I've now used a problem solving strategy to reduce my anxiety or to bring my anxiety down, okay? If I'm stressed out about a decision that I need to make and I just make that decision and I stick with that decision and I feel comfortable with that decision, now I've maybe used that as a problem solving or a conflict resolution strategy. So let's say I'm gonna buy a new laptop. I don't know which one I'm gonna buy. And I compare them and I research them and then I decide, okay? Again, stress level comes down through our conflict resolution and our problem solving and our thinking brain, okay? Exploring perspectives. We're gonna talk a lot about this one in a few minutes, but that's really, how do I see the world? How do I see the situation? So if I look outside today and it is raining for part of the day and it is sunny for part of the day, which part of the day do I pay attention to? Do I say it rained all day? Or do I say it rained part of the day, but it was sunny part of the day? So that idea about is the glass half full or is the glass half empty is also another way that thinking brain can kind of engage and calm some of our anxieties or some of our worries. And then distraction is a really good one. If we're busy thinking or doing something with our brain, we don't have time to worry. So one of my favorite distractions is Sudoku. Is anybody familiar with Sudoku? It's a numbers crossword puzzle. Okay. I cannot think about anything else when I'm doing Sudoku, right? Because I can't do it if I'm trying to do that. So if I'm really worried or nervous or really feeling like I'm stuck on something that I just can't seem to get resolved, one of the things I can do is just distract myself. And we'll talk a little bit about how being purposeful and intentional with distractions can be helpful. So does anybody have any favorite like distraction, what I would call thinking brain things that they like to do? Reading a book, crossword puzzles, anything like that?
I like to journal and read books, as well as I do some sketching. Last year I studied abroad in Ireland and I took an intro to art class, and I found that just sketching helps my brain like calm down.
And you're focused totally on the sketching, not all the stuff running through your brain. Okay,
Yeah.
good, nice, okay, yeah. So any kind of things that are just going to really create that distraction where you're not able to worry, you're not able to put your attention on whatever the worry is. And again, that's a short-term fix. We can't avoid, long-term, we can't avoid long-term anxieties by doing that, but that's kind of a good short-term fix for the kinds of things that we're talking today about with stress and anxiety. So we think about our thinking brain, it's really our cognitive part. And so we start to think about what are some of the beliefs that we maybe hold, whether they're true, whether they're not, but what are some of the especially the mistaken beliefs maybe that students hold about the big test, or even about schoolwork, or even about studying. Can you throw me some examples of something you see students, one of them that I always point out is that students will sort of have this belief that if I study longer, my test score is going to be better. Is that actually true though? Because everybody probably in this room knows somebody who studies a really long time and studies really hard and still struggles. And then you have that person in your class that probably never picked up the book except for 5 seconds before the test and aced that sucker, right? So I think we have to be really careful about some of the beliefs that we start to ingrain and that we start to believe are true. But what would be some others? So if you thought about it for a couple of minutes, what would be some other ideas or other beliefs?
I think the cramming thing is still out there too, get it in as close to the test as you can.
Science and research says that won't work, but there's sort of this idea that the more I cram in my brain and the later I stay up, this is another one, the later I stay up, the better I'm going to do, or the more I can cram in there, the more I'm going to know it. Yeah. And research and science actually doesn't support that. So what about too, the idea that this test has this extra big weight on it. So the idea that if I fail the test, I'm going to fail the class. And if I fail the class, I'm going to ruin my life. And if I ruin my life, I'm going to end up never employed, never having a job, living in poverty, right? I see some smiles, right? So there's sort of this belief system that gets us down a rabbit hole that's not necessarily a healthy rabbit hole to get down. Or the idea that this big test is everything about me, that it holds my whole identity is tied as to whether or not I pass this test, or whether or not I hold a 4.0, or whatever that belief system might be. And that becomes part of identity, or that becomes a definition of who people are. And so I think we have to be really careful about those beliefs too, because they're going to increase stress for us as well. So some of the cognitive distortions to watch for, all or none thinking errors. So this is the one where people tend to say, I'm really good at something, or I'm totally terrible at it. When in reality, there's probably a balance. There's probably some things they're good at and some things they're maybe not so good at. But it's sort of the idea that it's all good or all bad. And so my strengths and weaknesses are all or none. And particularly then if something goes negative, then it's all none. It's the none end. Filtering is the idea that we tend as human beings to focus on the negative. We focus on the glass that's half empty rather than the glass that's half full. It's just sort of human nature and what we do. Jumping to conclusions is that idea that I know I'm going to fail this test. It's just going to be so hard and I know I'm not going to do well. When there's no evidence base necessarily to support that. I'm actually a good test taker and I actually do really well on multiple choice tests, and I typically do well on tests, but I've decided that I'm not going to do well on this test. And I jump to the conclusion that I'm going to fail. Catastrophizing, that's sort of the one where we go to the extreme. You know, I'm going to fail, I'm not going to have a job, I'm not going to graduate, I'm not going to, on and on and on. So the worst case scenario, coming to the absolute worst possible, just like worst possible case, and knowing that that's then, or relieving that that's then going to be my fate or my outcome. Okay. Overgeneralizations tend to kind of match with jumping to conclusions. Sort of, again, something happens and therefore it's all about me, or it jumps to the conclusion. So that overgeneralization, I missed a test, therefore I'm not good at test taking. It jumps to the overgeneralizations about, particularly about characteristics, about the person is kind of where the overgeneralizations jump. And shoulds. Eric, you mentioned this, like, here's all the things I should do to study. I should cram, I should stay up late, I should, I don't know, drink 5-hour energy drinks, stand on my head and whistle 5 times. Like, whatever those things end up being, they create an extra stress and they create an external burden on us because we're now trying to engage in what that should behavior looks like. And we feel obligated to engage with it because we're afraid one of those other things is going to happen if we don't. So we've already set that stage up and set that belief system up. So as you think about getting ready for a big test, you can see why these cognitive errors could be really problematic. Okay? So if you notice one of these or you see one of these that you do, make a note of it, write it down, and then we'll work on how do I kind of maybe want to rephrase that, or how do I want to approach that differently. So again, this is sort of that all or none overgeneralization. There are only 2 times I feel stressed, day and night. So kind of typical of what I hear from college students. So any questions on the cognitive thinking brain side? Okay, so as we go into big tests then, here's sort of some tips, test taking strategies for managing this. We want to keep perspective about the importance. Do not let a test or outcome define who you are. Challenge your negative catastrophe thinking. And then I think the other thing is when we think about that filtering and predicting negative outcomes, really visualizing yourself being calm. Okay, closing your eyes, picturing yourself sitting in the room, taking some deep breaths, picturing myself sitting down at the test, picturing myself starting to take that test, feeling calm, feeling relaxed, feeling confident, okay? Because what we do is we tend to visualize the negative. And so we need to balance that. So we need to visualize the calm and the test taking and the success of that. And then visualize also what it feels like to pass that test. So maybe before I go to bed tonight or the next couple nights, I close my eyes and I think about, when I pass that test, it's going to feel awesome. It's going to be amazing. Like, what is it going to feel like when I pass that test? And so we're, again, replacing those negative reactions with more positive strategies to do. And then, of course, during the test, being really careful. I don't know this question, therefore I don't know anything. And then really panicking or getting really upset. So just sort of setting the stage to know there's going to be questions on this test that I'm not going to know. That's probably a reality for most people when they take a big test. There's something that they might not know. And if that's okay, can you be okay with that? And then stay in the moment, here and now, knowing what I know, which is not everything. We don't know everything that's going to be on that test probably. And I think that knowing everything also gets into one of those thinking errors, that idea that Eric talked about with cramming. I think that cramming is about, I need to know every single thing. And the reality of it is you don't know what test questions are going to be on there. So that might be tricky. So keeping a good cognitive perspective is really important. So that's one way to kind of start to approach it. And then we're going to approach the emotion brain side. And we're going to think about how do we regulate feelings? How do we provide support? And again, some of these are going to overlap. Like if I can use those thinking skills to calm my body and feel better about it, that's going to, of course, make my emotion brain also be calm and reactive as well. So one of the things I think we have to be careful about. Uh-oh, it jumped. I must have bumped it. Is emotional flooding. Pop it up. Okay. And emotional flooding is that point where we just feel overwhelmed. So emotional flooding is falling over the top of that hump. It's really feeling overwhelmed. It's feeling a high level of distress. The reason we call it flooding is because it floods out and it takes over our body and takes over our thinking capacities. So if you've ever seen a little kid who's like throwing a temper tantrum and a parent who's like trying to reason with them, how well does that usually go? Not so well, right? So their ability to tap into logic, their ability to problem solve, their ability to engage in thinking and logical behavior is really not happening when you're emotionally flooded. And so I think you have to be really careful that we don't let big tests let us feel emotionally flooded or help us or make us feel overwhelmed because that's not going to be helpful for us in this case. So if you think about a time when you were overwhelmed or when you felt just completely flooded with emotion, what did it look like? What did it feel like for you? And we're not necessarily going to share that, but just think about it for a moment. And then thinking about what did you need in that moment and what made it worse? So have you had that moment where you were just really, really struggling and people were trying to tell you things and it just wasn't helping? You just needed some reassurance or you just needed support. You just needed comfort. And so how do you start to create some of that reassurance and comfort for yourself about big tests so that you don't feel flooded and you don't feel overwhelmed? I think a great example of this is a student who's really worried about a test and maybe feeling really overwhelmed, maybe not to the point of emotionally flooded, but like really distressed about it. And someone comes up and says, well, you should do all of these things and you're going to be fine, right? They don't really want to hear that. What they really need is some reassurance that says, you're really struggling right now. You're really having a hard time. Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything that we can do? You know, what would make you feel better? There's really some nurturing and caring and support that's needed in that case. Have you had situations too where somebody says, you're going to be fine? How does that feel? It's pretty dismissive, right? It's not helpful. So I think really, truly that genuine, like, what do I need if I'm distressed? And knowing who the people are in your life that can do that, and knowing who the people might be in your life that make those worse, unfortunately, because we sometimes have those. But being able to tap into our support system is really important. And if we can also tap into our own resources, and our own resources are going to be, what are the things that relax me? What are the things that are going to calm me down? So again, if you think about that kid throwing a temper tantrum, if you can get them to calm down, then you can usually have a conversation with them. And then you can usually get to some problem solving and get to some solutions. But with our calming strategies, we need to be able to keep our body calm. We don't want to get to the point where we're emotionally flooded. So really kind of developing, what are my relaxation activities? And so think for just a couple minutes, what are 3 things that I really feel relaxed doing? You know, and kind of just jot those down, whether it's a hot bath, reading a book, sitting outside, taking a jog, playing my instrument, like whatever that might be. Incorporating those relaxation activities is really, really big. And then also distraction, again, that idea of if I'm feeling a negative emotion, can I distract away from it? Can I pay attention to a more positive emotion? If I'm worried about something, can I pay attention and refocus my energy and time onto something I feel better about? And then connection and support. We talked a little bit about that, is really important. I think being able to connect with people, have supportive people, be able to have conversations about how well we are doing or maybe not doing, and being okay to be not okay for a short period of time. There's a great, Brene Brown talks about how, I think it's Brene Brown, talks about how anxiety thrives in isolation and fear. So if we want to be anxious, isolate someone and give them a little fear. They will be anxious, okay? And so connection and calm are the way that we manage that. And if we think about that, our bodies can't do fear and calm at the same time. We just physiologically can't do it. We either have to do one or the other. They don't work together very well because they're different physiological responses. So if we can be calm, our body will not necessarily, not 100%, but for the most part, we don't do fear and calm together. If we can be calm and override that distress feeling, and if we're distressed, it's going to override calm. We just don't typically do them together, okay? And then deep breathing is one of the resources that we know works, and we know is definitely a calming strategy. It decreases your blood pressure, increases your oxygen flow to your brain. And so we know that that is one of our evidence-based practices for calming strategies as well. That and progressive muscle relaxation. And so we're going to talk about both of those really quickly and just kind of go through those. How many of you, just sort of a show of hands, are familiar with some sort of deep breathing or some sort of breathing exercises? Okay, so I'm going to just go through a really quick one just so that we're kind of familiar with it. But one of the things I always tell students, we want to make sure that it's harder to do on Zoom because you can't see my belly, but when you're doing deep breathing, we want to make sure that you're doing belly breathing. If I breathe up here, that's chest breathing, okay? I want to get that breath down into my gut and down into my belly and down into my diaphragm. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we take that in breath, that we're filling our belly up with like a balloon. So go ahead and put your hand on your belly real quick, and we'll take a nice big breath in. Make sure your belly fills up, doesn't go in. And then we'll hold it for about 4 seconds. And then we'll breathe that belly air out. And feel that your belly kind of go back in. Okay, and then we're going to do another one real quick. So we'll take a big breath in for 4. And we'll hold for 4. And then we'll go out for 4. Now, when I get right here, I can do an out breath. This is going to be a little hard to see me, but you can do an out breath. And I can still have a conversation with you right here, okay? When you do that out breath, what I want you to do is I want you to breathe that out breath to the point where you can't have a conversation, to the point where you're out of breath and you're not able to engage into a conversation. And then that's going to create a bigger oxygen intake on your next breath. And the reason that they call it square breathing is because what you can do is you can also draw on a piece of paper or trace where you go in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and then come back around, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. And if you just keep tracing that, you'll make a smaller and smaller square and a smaller and smaller box. And so that's another way that you can kind of trace that or follow that with deep breathing. And really, it doesn't matter if the 4 count, if you're a singer and you use your lungs a lot, 4 count is probably too short. For some people, they like a 3-3 count. Some people like a 4-4 count. 3-4-5, it doesn't really matter. I think that you find a rhythm that works for you and that you're consistent with it and that you practice it. Because part of it is like riding a bicycle. If we know how to ride a bicycle, we can jump on a bicycle and ride it. It's really hard to unlearn riding a bicycle, right? But if we don't know how to do it, we don't know how to do it. And so what we want to do is train our body just to say, oh, here are these deep breaths. Oh, I know what's coming. This is a time for me to relax and calm down, and then to start to train our body to be relaxed and to be calm. And so the more that we practice that, the better that we'll get at that. So I would really encourage you to think about adding this as sort of a piece of like maybe your routine right before you study, or part of your routine right before you take your big test. Nobody's necessarily even going to see that you're doing it, but just sort of keeping that body calm, keeping that body relaxed, some positive self-talk. You can also implement that as you're doing your breathing and implement a mantra in there. So, and then progressive muscle relaxation. This one's a little harder to do over Zoom, but I'll try to explain it the best that I can. So you're gonna start with your fingers, and we're just gonna work from our fingers all the way through our bodies, through our torso, and then we'll move from our toes all the way through. I mean, we're not gonna move through everything, but we'll just move through our arms together. If you wanna join me, feel free. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our fingers and we're gonna tense them up nice and tight for a count of 4. But before we do it, as we do it, we're gonna breathe in while we tense. So we'll take a big breath in and tense our fingers. We'll hold it for 4, and then as we exhale, we'll release that tension, okay? So we'll do our fingers, and then we'll do our forearms, and then we'll go up to kind of our biceps area, okay? So let's do, with our hands, let's take a nice big breath in and tighten those hands and tense those hands up. And we'll hold it for 4, and then we'll release as we exhale. And then we'll take a nice big breath in again. We'll hold it for 4. And then we'll release. Kind of let all those little fingers wiggle. Okay, and then this time when we tense our hands, we'll go ahead and engage your forearm, and we'll do 2 for the forearm. So we're going to engage those hands and fingers and all the way up to our, kind of up to our elbow. So big breath in, hold for 4, and release as we out breath. And a big breath in, hold for 4, and out breath for 4. And then let's do one more, and we'll go ahead and engage those biceps and that next part of our arm. So we'll do a big breath in, and release for 4. And one more as we breathe in. And let's, as we release for 4, let's roll our shoulders back too, because our shoulders would be the next one we would go to, okay? And then what you would do as you work through your shoulders, then you would also do your toes up through your leg and up through your muscles. And so that's a progressive muscle relaxation strategy that you can use. And you can do your whole body standing up, just being really stiff like a board, and then relaxing, or if you choose to do it sitting, it's hard to demonstrate, but if you have a flat chair and you grab the bottom of your chair, you can kind of pull up, and that will engage and tense the rest of your body by grabbing sort of the underseat of that chair. So that's another strategy that you can use to really get your body to relax and to start to move into a calm position. All right, so one of the videos that I sent out a little link that had some resources on it. And one of those in there has some calming strategies and some deep breathing. I can't remember the lady's name, but she talks about one, I think she calls it smell the flowers, where you kind of take a big breath in and then let it out. You do some twists, and she's got a whole bunch of different deep breathing strategies for test taking. So you'll see some of that in one of those videos, and I think that's a really good resource. She has kind of silly names for them, but I think the strategies are great. So, all right. So again, how do we practice relaxation then before we go into a test? And the way we're going to do that is just training our body to be calm. We need to teach our body how to be calm. If our body doesn't know what to do with deep breathing, and we're not practicing and we're not utilizing it, we spend a lot of energy trying to figure out how to do it. But if it's a very natural, learned tendency, then our body can really easily fall into that. So if anybody ever, for example, if you ever played a musical instrument, you had to learn how to hold your lips, you had to learn where all the keys were, and then eventually you just naturally did it. Same thing with pretty much any sports activity that you would have done. If you're learning to play volleyball, you have to hold your hands a certain way to hit the ball, and you work really hard to get that muscle memory on how to do it, and then you know how to do it, and you don't even think about it. And so we want to be able to do those things, pick up that instrument and put it on our mouth and be able to hold our lips and do the things we need to do without even thinking about it. And so we want to do the same thing with our relaxation strategies. We need to practice them. Our body needs to know intuitively how to do it. We need to have the muscle memory to make it happen. Develop a routine that involves calming strategies. Again, seeking positive encouragement and support. Stay focused on your strengths. And then develop and practice your test-taking strategies. Knowing what you're going to do, knowing what my test, what test-taking strategies am I going to use? Am I going to look at all the questions first? Am I going to answer everyone? Am I going to leave some blank? Those kinds of things can also keep us calm. That one doesn't quite fit in here as well, but I wanted to make sure we put it in there because that's going to emotionally make us feel better. If we also have a plan, we know what we're going to kind of go into the test and how we're going to approach that test. Some other things you can think about during the test: chewing a gum that I like, a relaxing lotion or a smell that's calming or comforting. If I like the smell of vanilla or lavender or lemon, You know, if I like the taste of peppermint, or I like this, you know, something like that could be a strategy to keep you calm and relaxed. Being on time, of course, keeps us calm and relaxed, but we don't want you to be there too early, because then we'll worry about it, right? So being there early enough that we can get there, be comfortable, practice our relaxation routine, practice the relaxation in that space. Use our routine, follow the same one that you're going to study with, and then plan a way to manage distress. We talked a little bit about this, the distress of a difficult question. So when I get to a difficult question and I may be struggling with it, that's a really good time to take a deep breath and keep my body relaxed, okay, while I try to think through the answer of that. And then use our test taking strategies. All right, any questions on that? Okay, you're hanging with me well. And so then what we end up with is the blend of kind of what they call wise mind. They call it, DBT calls it wise mind. You'll also hear mindfulness. But really that blending of the emotion and the emotion brain and feeling brain and the reasonable or thinking brain. And when we can integrate that together, that's really when we can do our best and really perform at our highest level and our highest functioning. And so you'll see there's a lot of overlap in some of these, but I really like the idea of being able to sort of bring all of that together. We can use some thinking strategies, we can use some calming strategies, but when we put them together, we're really going to have be able to have a toolbox that's really full, especially if we have all three in there and we know which one to use when we need to use it. And that's really my goal for you tonight, is to have a pretty big toolbox by the time you leave. So this graphic is really simple. You can probably just Google it. It comes up pretty quickly. But when we talk about mindfulness, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about being attentive and intentional and focused with our mind and keeping our body calm and at ease. So that combination is what we're really looking for. And so some strategies on how do we do that? Because this is the way, the one with the little sun over there, it's a little more calm. That's the mindset we need to be able to enter a test with. That's the mindset that we want to take into a testing. And I feel like, Eric, as you're talking about the cramming, that's mindful. How much can I throw in here? How much can I chuck in here to maybe try to find later? But if it's not organized, we're not going to retain it. If it's not organized, we're not going to be able to pull it out when we need it, and that information is going to get lost. And we talk about working memory. That working memory is that ability to go into the grocery store and remember the 5 things that I need. The more stressed out we are, the least likely we are to remember those 5 things. The more things we have to remember, the least likely we are to remember those things as well. So that has to do with our working memory, which is an important part of studying. So, all right, so we're going to talk quickly about mindfulness. Means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally, and I would add, and keeping our body calm to this list, okay? And so this is kind of the foundation of mindfulness, and you know, most of our therapists use mindfulness in a variety of different ways, and I think if you want more information, there's lots and lots of information out there that you can access or get, or let us know, and we can send you some additional resources. But mindfulness really has these components. It's that purposeful attention in the moment where my body's experiencing what's happening around me and surrounding me. And I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to assign meaning to it. I'm not going to overthink it or take on big emotion around it. Okay, so I like this graphic. This graphic talks about really being present. I need to be present. When I go in and take a test, if my body is thinking about, my brain is thinking about what happened in the past, how successful is that going to be for me in that moment? Probably not very successful. And I've worried about what's going to happen tomorrow when the test is over. That's probably not going to help me in that test room either. Okay, so I want to be present and available and calm in that testing space and in that testing moment. In mental health, we talk about worry about the past leads to depression and leads to depressed mood. Worry about the future leads to anxiety and worry and panic. Okay, so staying in the here and now, controlling what I can control in the moment is really a key part of mindfulness as well. The other thing I talk about is with mindfulness, I think one thing that's really important is not making it super complicated. Mindfulness is made to be simple. We can be mindful for a moment, We can be mindful for a minute. Okay, we can be mindful for several minutes. When we start to look at meditation, now what we're talking about is the practice of mindfulness. We take those moments and we build them on top of each other. We take those minutes and we build them on top of each other. So then we build a practice where we are using meditation for, 10 or 15 minutes as we're meditating in a quiet moment, okay? But we don't just walk into a room and start to meditate. I've had so many students say, well, I've tried meditation, it doesn't work for me, okay? Yeah, well, let's back up. What are the foundational steps of mindfulness, okay? Are we attentive, purposeful, focused? If you're trying to do a meditation and your brain's worried about all these other things, we're not practicing being mindful in the moment. Okay? And for some people, those moments are really little and short, and that's fine. Meditation's a longer practice, and for some people, meditation's a great practice. For other people, their practice of meditation has to be really short. It might be 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, okay? And certainly there are people, all kinds of different meditative practices, and we're gonna talk about those in a few minutes. I also like to talk about guided imagery. This overlaps a little bit with meditation. Guided imagery is that idea of being able to visualize something that keeps us calm and peaceful. So think for a moment about a place that you visited that makes you feel relaxed and comfortable, okay? And just sit with that for just a second for me. What do you visualize? What do you hear? What do you see? Okay. If we sit and think about those places that are calm for us and we visualize and start to guide that imagery, our body will respond very similarly to as if we were in that place. Okay. We'll feel a sense of calm. We'll feel a sense of relaxation. And so I'll do sometimes a guided imagery with students in my office, and a lot of times students will pick sometimes they'll pick going to a beach or going somewhere, and you think about the sun shining down on you, and your body will start to relax as you think about the warm sunshine hitting you. And then we'll look outside and it'll be snowing and -30, right? Because we live in Duluth, Minnesota. But that ability to sort of guide and use our imagery and use our senses to kind of keep us calm is another way that we can practice mindfulness. Sensory calming, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is similar. It really grounds us to our space. So with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you pick 5 things in the room that you can see, and you kind of connect with those. So in the room that I'm sitting in, above me, there's a green plant, and it has a couple different shades of green, and it has a yellow pot, and it has a little figure stuck in it. And so I can visually focus and be purposeful and attentive to that particular item in my room, okay? And I can pick 5 items to be purposeful and attentive to. And then 4 things that I might touch. So in my chair, I can feel my butt sitting in my chair. It's pretty warm. I have a light on over here, and it's probably hot at this point. So those are things that I can touch and that I can feel. And 3 things that you can hear. You can hear my voice as we talk. 2 things if I can smell and taste. And so that's sort of a grounding orientation to the room. And that's also something you can do. I have a lot of students who use this at bedtime, grounding themselves sort of to their room with the things that they can see and smell and hear and taste and touch within that bedroom setting or that calm space. Okay? So that's another sort of sensory calming. And you can probably Google these and find more written examples or more information about most of them. The sensory calming one is pretty common, and so is guided imagery. So we're going to back up for meditation for a moment. One thing I think is also really important is that we know the different types of meditation. In order to be able to have an effective meditation or mindfulness practice, we need to know which one kind of appeals to us the most or which one is most effective for us. And so we can have some breath meditations. Breath meditations are going to focus on your breath entering and leaving your body. So if you were to listen to a breath meditation, it would say something to the effect of, feel the oxygen as it comes in, feel the air, the oxygen as it comes in through your nostrils, feel the cold sensation as it fills your body and fills your lungs. Feel the warm air as it exhales out of your breath, okay? And so the focus will be on the breath whenever you're doing a breathing meditation. And it'll be very purposeful and intentional that it's focused on your breath work and the practice of breathing in and out. And then we have body scans. meditations. These are going to promote self-awareness of physical sensations, sort of what I described a while ago. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your butt in the chair, feel the sensations around your body. Those kinds of things. What pains you, what hurts you, what feels relaxed and comfortable. But it really connects the physical sensations to the mind and the body to be present and attuned to your body. So it'll have some breath probably work too, but typically also focusing on the body and the sensations of the body. Okay. And then safe place meditation. This is going to be similar to the guided imagery. It's going to be the ability to close your eyes, think about and focus your attention on a safe place. It's going to promote calmness and relaxation through the connection to the world. So rather than focusing on our breath or focusing on our body, we're going to focus on another place in the world or a visualization of a place in the world. And so the focus is going to be different. The attention is going to be a little bit different. Okay. And then the last one comes out of a lot of the mindfulness work that you see really common is loving kindness meditations. And loving kindness meditations are going to promote connection to kindness, compassion, positive emotion, connection to self, connection to others. So then we have you think about the people that you love, think about how people love you, think about what the connection is within your relationships in your life. Okay. So I think it's always really important to talk about, you have to know which one of these kind of works for you. Which one do I like? Are there ones on this list that appeal to you more or less? For depending on your background, depending on your experiences, one of these might be more effective. So I also think one of the things that happens sometimes for students is they say, well, I tried meditation and it doesn't work for me. For me, breath meditation is really hard. Okay, breath meditation is not my first choice. I tend to pick safe place meditations probably first. And then I kind of flip maybe between body scan or loving kindness would probably be my second one. Okay, but I have colleagues who would pick breath meditation number one. And there's a lot of, there's whole practices on nothing but the breath and the breath meditation. And then of course you have religious meditations and meditation, translucent meditation, that whole next level of meditation that really is a different level of practicing. But as we just kind of build the stepping stones and as it relates to sort of interacting with test anxiety and stress, these are probably the ones that will be the most effective with that. Okay. How's everybody doing? Hanging with me okay? All right, good. All right, so I do have a quick meditation in here. It's about 3 minutes long. So if you'd like to join me, we're gonna do this real quick if I can get it to work. This one is actually a pre-exam meditation that I found. And I like it because what it does is it visualizes academic success. And I think for the purposes of tonight, as we talk about being successful and being able to be successful with academics, I think this is a really great video, or it's a video. I'm not a fan of the visuals in this, but some people will really like them. Some people might not. If you don't like the visuals, just close your eyes if you're comfortable. And let's see if it'll work. If it works, this is a technology win for me. I should say that after it loads. Let's see if it's gonna do it. There we go. Is it good?
First, just close your eyes and relax on your chair. With a gentle attention, notice your breath as you easily inhale and exhale. See if you can let go of any tension from the day. Try not to push your breath, just notice its natural movement from inhale to exhale. Now notice the feeling of your sit bones firmly on your chair and your feet on the ground. Then take a few moments to notice the small sounds in your room. Now Now that your mind is calm and your attention is fully in the present, imagine yourself entering the exam room feeling confident, comfortable, and focused. Envision yourself taking a few calming breaths as you've just done. See if you can imagine a sense of confidence in your whole body, in your arms, your legs, and your mind. Imagine yourself opening the exam, feeling awake and ready. Remind yourself that you don't need to know the answer to every single question. If any anxiety comes, imagine it passing as easily as you exhale a breath. Take a few more moments picturing yourself feeling comfortable, completing the exam, and reviewing any difficult questions with the remaining time. Again, notice the small sounds of the room for a moment. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes again.
Okay. Here we go. It worked. I'm surprised. I never quite knew if it was going to work, but I like that meditation. I thought it was really calm. But I think you have to be also able to filter. Like if the music was too loud or too high pitched, if the voice was annoying or that wasn't the right kind of voice for you, if the visuals were distracting, I think you have to pick what works for you. I kind of picked what I liked for tonight, unfortunately. So hopefully the majority of you found it calming, but if you didn't, and it's not for you, pick something else. I think what's really important is that you find your thing and you find what's comfortable for you. I actually, when I look at like calming music and different things, I tend to lean towards like guitars and harps. I know other people that lean toward pianos or more flute kind of instruments. So I think a lot of that's just personal preference. And so I think it's really important to not give up, but to keep trying to find something that fits for you. And then knowing what that is that fits for you and really personalizing those things. So some great resources you can look at. There's all kinds of meditations and relaxation music and videos and visuals. And I think anything that kind of gives you that visual experience, when you find it, you like it, bookmark it, go back to it. It becomes familiar. It becomes comfortable for you. Some relaxation meditation apps. There's Insight Timer, Headspace, Mind, Body, Breath, Calm. Those are all, I think they all offer like free trials or free like shortened versions that you can access resources on. UCLA has some really nice meditations on their website. They're at Mindful Meditations. And then there's also a blog that has some free guided meditation resources. So again, the guided meditations are going to be a little bit more visualizing, picturing or walking through or connecting to the world. So you'll see those. I did include the meditation that we just did on the resource page that I had sent out earlier. I think Katie had posted it to her students, and I don't know, Madonna might have too, but if you have those, I have a resource page. If you would like it, let me know. These are on there. And so again, as we think about strategies of mindfulness, engaging in a mindful practice, be purposeful, be intentional, be non-judgmental as you engage with studies. And as you think about the experience of taking that test. Use meditation to breathe, recognize your body sensation, and having a positive intentionality. I think that's the positive intention or the positive mindset as I go into this, picturing myself being successful. Non-judgmental is really one I want to talk about just for a moment. Non-judgmental is absent of comparison or absent of assigning meaning. One of the things that I see really common in college settings is students who are like, oh my gosh, what do you think about the test? How do you think it's going to be? What do you think it's going to be like? Are you worried about it? Are you not worried about it? That's all comparison. And anytime we're doing comparison, we're going to end up in a judgmental assigning meaning and assigning rank and order. And that's not necessarily helpful for us. I think that we really need to stay present in the moment, focused on what we need to do, not on how others around us are sort of interacting or reacting. One of the things I think is really common when a test is done, you'll go out into the hallway and the students will all be talking about how did you think the test went? But if we stay in that present moment, the test is over. The test is done, okay? There might be some value in maybe correcting some errors or thinking twice about some things, but how much time do we want to spend on something that's sort of already done? And does it make us feel better or does it make us feel worse? Because I usually find in those conversations then comes a later conversation that says, how did you do? And how did you do becomes a comparison. Okay, I start to base how well I did based on how well you did. And now we assign meaning to that and we assign judgment to that. But the reality of it is you can't change that test score. So how you did is how you did. And that is reflective of your grade. And so being able to kind of keep that little bit of I focus rather than sort of how did everybody else do. So I think that's a big part of mindfulness, is just staying in the moment and focused intentionally and purposefully on me and my academic and my accomplishments and what I need to do. And I think that's important too. I don't know that there's any benefit. I've never heard people say, how was the test? And they said, oh, it was easy. Does that really relieve anybody's anxiety? Not really. And if they say, oh, it was hard, that really doesn't relieve anybody's anxiety either. So again, how useful are those conversations? Just thinking about that and being purposeful about it and intentional about where we're focusing our attention. Staying in the moment, when it's over, relaxing, celebrating that it's over, doing something to reward ourselves, and moving on to the next thing that we're going to look at. So again, that's some of the strategies. The last thing, don't forget to deep and restful sleep helps us restore energy. We need it to perform well academically. Our brain is working while we're asleep to create the new pathways. Neural pathways are being developed all the time. That's how learning happens. Our brain needs time to develop those neural pathways. Learning, memory, concentration, focus, insight, all of those things are new pathways we want to create, and we need sleep and energy to do that. We also want to be able to fight off common infections and hormones, or releasing the chemicals that keep us healthy and safe. That's really important as we think about just fighting off our immune systems. It also lets our heart and our vascular system rest, brings our blood pressure down, brings our heart rate down, slows and calms our body, which is, again, that really important piece of managing stress. So just some really quickly, make sure you have a good sleep routine, make sure it's a dark, cool, quiet room, sensory pieces, comfortable blankets, sounds, noises that make you feel comfortable or at ease, turn off your electronics. Having a consistent waking and sleeping routine is important. And will help you function better. Again, it's that routine and practice that your body knows what I'm going to do. I'm in bed now, and that means it's time to sleep. That means it's time to relax. It means it's time to shut down. Just like when I start to put my tennis shoes on, what does my dog do? She jumps up because what does she think? Right? All I have to do is get out a pair of tennis shoes and she's ready to go. Doesn't always mean she's going for a walk, but she realizes that this is what I'm doing. Oh, this is what this means. And we really want our brains to do the same thing. We want to be able to say, it's time to sleep, it's time to study, it's time to relax, it's time to take a test. And so we need to be able to train our bodies to do that. Okay. Any questions about anything? Okay, really quickly, I always just put up some crisis resources if you're struggling or you know people that are struggling. We know that we all have that component when we fall over that and we have a high level of distress. Know that there are emergency resources available. These are also on our website. So anytime you're worried about or concerned about a student or friend or coworker, know that these are on our website as well. And then the last thing I have is, I'm gonna paste, whoops, that's my reference. I'm gonna try to. I'm going to blank out of here. We would appreciate it if you would give us some feedback on tonight's presentation. Just let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, whether it was helpful or not. I think there's about 6 questions on it, maybe 7. I can't remember if there's 6 or 7, but it'll just take you a couple minutes to do. So that's always helpful for us as we kind of move forward. But any other comments, questions? I'll kind of open it up to the floor. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen, and I will go in and post that chat. Yes, this is a great question. So Tatum sent me a question that said, do you think there'll be a higher occurrence of social anxiety once the pandemic is over? So my personal opinion on that, because I don't have any scientific evidence about it, because we haven't done a pandemic before, but I think that's a great question. I think that I'm not sure about social anxiety compared to all anxiety. I do think all anxiety we're going to see an increase in. The other piece that kind of gets into that, there's a really great author, Bessel van der Kolk, and he studies a lot of trauma. And one of the things that the mental health community is looking at is how do we keep people's mental health well? Because we know that high levels of stress over an extended period of time, chronic high levels of stress have a really negative impact on people. And so that's sort of one of the areas of worry for mental health professionals is sort of, okay, what can we do to sort of mitigate the circumstances of this chronic high stress? And people really need to be purposeful and intentional about decreasing that level of stress. So I think we're going to have an increase. I think we're at risk of an increase for depression and anxiety both as a result of that. I do think that this will for some people, this will change how we socially interact. I know for me personally, I'm a pretty calm person, but like even going to the grocery store, I find myself really, really anxious. You know, as I'm going through the store and there's people all around me. And I went to one store last week and it was very well organized and I didn't have I wasn't forced to interact with a lot of people. And so I felt like I had control over that situation. So my anxiety was lower. And I went to another store and it was very chaotic. It was very crowded. People were not being respectful of sort of the tape on the floor, how you were supposed to navigate. And so for that environment was a much more out of control environment. And so then my anxiety went up. So we know that situations that are uncertain, things that are unpredictable, situations that we lack control in create an increase in anxiety. So yeah, I kind of expect we might see an increase in all of those things. And I think social will be one of them. A lot of times too, Tatum, social anxiety is about worry about what other people think of me and worry about whether or not I'm pleasing other people. But I definitely see a lot of increased anxiety too about catching germs and being worried about catching sickness and illness and maybe wanting to avoid people because of sickness and illness worries, which is a little bit different than social anxiety, but yeah, I think it'll definitely impact us. Yeah, and I think in terms of being able to be supportive, I think one of these authors that we talked about, he talked about the importance of structure. So planning and controlling the things that we can control. He talked about the importance of connection. How do I connect with people? Laughing, eating dinner together, joining together, doing things like that, connecting, moving our bodies so that we have some rhythm, moving our bodies, getting our body in touch with the world. Being connected is really important with the world. And then the last one he talked about was, what was the other one? Oh, celebrating competencies. We need to hold on to our strengths right now. And so how do we hold on to our strengths? How do we practice the things we're good at? If that's doodling or drawing, and even if we're not good at it, if we like it, how do we organize the pantry or cook a meal or sing a song or whatever we do well, I think is really important. So yeah, so I think as we think about like how to help ourselves or how to help our friends and family that might be struggling during this time, I think those are really good key things to kind of help manage the stresses that are going on. I also think it's really important to ask people like, what has helped you in the past? What things have you found helpful in the past? Are there things that you need? What can I do to help you? What would be helpful for you? Crisis lines are out there, resources are out there. Most mental health services are online right now. That was actually a really big decision that came out through our federal government to waive the HIPAA. You guys are computer people, right? The HIPAA stuff, the health information protect. They actually waived some of the restrictions on that temporarily for mental health providers across the country. And that's been huge because that's allowed people to access mental health care. So if people are struggling, we want to get them care and we want to get them to access care. So yeah. And if there's more questions about that, I'm happy to answer those, and, you know, shoot me a message in the chat and we can touch base with that too. So good. Other thoughts or questions? All right. Go ahead. I'm going to try to paste that in the chat, but I don't know if it's going to go. If not, that'll be okay. Log out of there.
I would say if you want to just email it to me too, Sarah, I can send
Just
it
do
out.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just do that. Okay. I'll just do that because I'm not quite sure where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I thought I could cut and paste out there, but it doesn't want to paste. So that would be great though, just to give us some feedback.
Sure.
Now I've got my thing all messed up. All right, there we go. Well, thank you for your time. If there's anything else you need, my email is swells1@css, so feel free to reach out.